Okay, welcome. This is our second demo lecture for the Design 1 class for the first unit. I'm doing another lecture because I feel like on the first lecture I didn't give you quite enough on a number of things. One of the things I felt like I didn't give you enough examples of different kinds of mark making to help you get started with your mark making exercise. So I'm going to start with the page where I've already started and just demonstrate a number of new varieties of mark making. And I want you to remember we talked about you could vary in terms of direction, you can vary in terms of value, which can have to do with what tool you use, the thickness or thinness of your line or of your mark. Remember, these don't have to just be lines, right? Because we're practicing mark making, they can be as non-linear as possible. They can be marks like that, just big, and they don't have to be linear, like they don't have to have a direction. So we talked about value and pressure, but there's also regularity or irregularity. So on this page, right here, I started ahead with some demos of a number of different marks. You might want to zoom in just for a second to see on the pencil, right in here, and I tried a number of different kinds of marks. I'll go over some of them with a darker pencil so you can kind of see. So I was just trying verticals, but lots of places where I was varying my mark making in a lot of different ways, practicing with different kinds of circles, or not, fully circles, but kind of loops, right? But another kind of loop would be like a kind of a circle 8 or kind of a Google kind of loop, right? And that can get really compressed, right? Or it can spread out. You can vary your line weight so it can be heavy in places and light in others, right? I did a lot of the same mark making systems again using a fine point Sharpie, but we could also do a lot of these same kinds of mark making using a ballpoint pen, and you'd see just how the slight difference of the thickness of the line weight can change a little bit the quality of those mark making systems. So for the exercise that you're going to do, the most important thing is trying to make as many as possible. The variety, trying to create as much as possible, is the most important goal. And think about, as you're making your mark making systems, think about how they build to create different kinds of textures and patterns, and try to get them to make as many different kinds of patterns as possible. So like a mark making system like this. And a lot of these, they don't necessarily look like much of a pattern when you first start them, but if you continue them for a while, you just keep trying that idea, or vice versa, if you compress them by making them smaller, like making the size of the mark itself smaller, so that as it expands around the page, right, it creates that more consistent, continuous kind of mark making system. The more it expands, the more you can kind of see, oh, that is a really distinct, different kind of texture, different from that, and different from that, and different from that. Okay, so that was the first thing I wanted to cover. I'm going to maybe make a few more things using the biggest Sharpie, just so you can really see them clearly. So let's take that same kind of pattern I was doing before, kind of a pattern texture kind of idea. And here in the Fattest Sharpie, you can really kind of see it more clearly. Notice also, as you start doing this, you start creating areas where one texture and one pattern and texture overlaps another one, and that creates new kind of interactions between the textures, like what's going on in there. Let's see what this looks like if we expand it to a thicker mark. every mark making system is really just the idea of you starting to do some things and then figuring out what's the rule for what you're making and continuing to do that. Like what we started with this kind of looping figure 8, right? You figure out what is the rule to this. How big does it need to be? How much does it need to vary in line weight from place to place? How much does it need to overlap? How much does it need to expand over into new areas? Does it need to turn? Does it need to compress in places? And just see how far you can take that one idea and keep going. Okay, so before I get to the next part, where I'm going to talk a little bit about the assignments that you're going to do, the other thing I want to emphasize is, as much as possible, even though we have these 3 different tools, and you got graphite, you've got your ballpoint, and then you have your Sharpie, and in fact you have multiple, you can have like a fat Sharpie or a fine point Sharpie. And also keep in mind that your tools can also vary by, let's say, the difference between that fine point Sharpie and this one is that one has a lot of ink in it and one does not. And they give very different marks. Similarly, the difference between this fat Sharpie and this one, similarly, one has a lot less ink in it than the other, and that changes the quality of the mark. But the point I wanted to make is, so we have these 3 tools, most notably graphite with these inks. And I would strongly recommend that for all the textures that you create, that they have some amount of graphite and some amount of ink. Because when you get to the point where you're making your grids, if you have some that are only graphite and some that are only ink, the difference in value and in color, because these are cooler than these, and the difference in value and especially in color is going to create these kind of contrasts. They're going to be a little bit unpleasant. Whereas if all the textures have a little bit of both, that'll be better. Okay, I have about a minute, so let's talk about the sketchbook assignment for a second. I'm going to get a new page. So in the sketchbook, your sketchbook assignment begins with 2 pages. I'm going to draw. You've got 2 pages, and the first 2 pages that you're going to do, you're just going to fill them with all those kinds of marks, just like I demoed. I would recommend just doing 1 page, flipping and doing another page, not doing the backs of pages, just because they tend to get more messy. So you do 1 page, and then you do another page. Just that, just filling all the way to the edge. And then the next 4 pages, you're going to take those grid ideas that you had, and then break them up into 2.5 by 2.5 boxes. I think it's 2.5, yeah, boxes. And I think I calculated you could get actually 6 to a page. I don't know why I have 4 to the page right there, but let's imagine there's 6 to them. And in each of these, you're going to fill these boxes up with those ideas. I'm running out of time. And that should then give you a total when you're done, because it'll be 4 pages, yeah, and there'll be 6 on each page. If you fill all of them, you'll have 24, but you only have to do 20. That is our time. So in the next part, I will finish talking about the sketchbook assignment, as well as talking about the grid assignment and the final project. Okay, see you there.